20 American cities that completely vanish off the map. Why you should know. Number 20. Centralia, Pennsylvania, the town that's been burning since 1962. Centralia was a thriving coal mining town of over 1,000 residents until an underground coal fire started in 1962 and never stopped. The fire was likely ignited during trash burning in an abandoned mine pit, and it spread through the vast network of coal mines beneath the town. Smoke began rising from cracks in the ground. Sinkholes opened up, swallowing yards and streets, and carbon monoxide seeped into homes. The federal government declared the town uninhabitable in the 1980s and offered to relocate residents. Most accepted, leaving behind their homes and memories. Today, Centralia has a population of 5. The fire still burns beneath the abandoned streets, and it could continue for another 250 years. Highways buckle from the heat, steam rises from fissures, and the few remaining structures stand as monuments to a town killed by the earth itself. The fire has consumed 400 acres of underground coal seams and shows no signs of burning out. Number 19. Picher, Oklahoma, poisoned by lead and abandoned. Picher was a booming lead and zinc mining town that produced over half the lead used in bullets during World War I and II. The prosperity came at a horrific cost nobody understood at the time. A century of mining left massive piles of toxic waste called chat covering the landscape. Lead contamination poisoned the soil, water, and air. Children in Picher had blood lead levels so high they suffered irreversible neurological damage. The groundwater became undrinkable, and sinkholes from collapsed mines threatened to swallow entire neighborhoods. By the 2000s, the EPA declared the entire town a Superfund site too contaminated to inhabit. A devastating tornado in 2008 destroyed much of what remained, and the federal government officially disincorporated Picher in 2013. The population went from 20,000 at its peak to 0. Today, Picher is a ghost town where mountains of toxic chat still tower over empty streets. Number 18. Glen Rio, Texas/New Mexico, killed by the interstate. Glen Rio straddled the Texas-New Mexico border along Route 66, serving travelers with gas stations, motels, and diners. The town thrived during Route 66's heyday, when cross-country travelers had no choice but to stop in small towns along the way. Everything changed in 1975 when Interstate 40 was completed, bypassing Glen Rio entirely. The interstate ran 12 miles north of town, and overnight, the traffic disappeared. Businesses closed within months. The last resident left in the early 1980s. Today, Glen Rio stands frozen in time with rusting gas pumps, collapsed motels, and fading signs advertising services nobody needs anymore. The town exists as a haunting reminder that infrastructure decisions can erase communities. America's transportation evolution created winners and losers, and Glen Rio definitively lost. Number 17. Body, California. Gold rush boom to absolute bust. Body exploded from nothing to 10,000 residents during the 1870s gold rush, complete with dozens of saloons, breweries, a Chinatown, and a red light district. The town was notorious for violence and lawlessness, averaging a murder a day at its peak. When the gold ran out, people left as quickly as they'd arrived. By 1915, the population had dropped to 698. A devastating fire in 1932 destroyed much of the business district, and by 1940, Bodie was essentially abandoned. What makes Bodie remarkable is that it's been preserved in a state of arrested decay as a state historic park. Visitors can walk through authentic buildings filled with furniture, goods, and personal items left behind when residents fled. Bodie proves that resource extraction creates temporary prosperity that vanishes the moment the resources run out. Number 16. Cahaba, Alabama, a capital city swallowed by floods. Cahaba served as Alabama's first state capital from 1820 to 1826, a prestigious designation that seemed to guarantee prosperity. The town sat at the confluence of the Alabama and Cahaba rivers, a location that proved disastrous. Catastrophic flooding repeatedly devastated Cahaba, and after particularly severe floods in the 1820s, the state capital was relocated to Tuscaloosa. The town struggled on as a cotton shipping port, even serving as a Confederate prison during the Civil War, but the floods kept coming. By 1900, Cahaba was abandoned. Today, it's an archaeological park where you can walk among ruins of what was once Alabama's most important city. Cahaba's story is a stark lesson about building in flood zones. Number 15. Gilman, Colorado, a mining town, too toxic to save. Gilman perched on a cliff 300 feet above the Eagle River, serving as a company town for the New Jersey Zinc Company. The mines produced zinc, copper, silver, lead, and gold for nearly a century. What nobody realized until too late was that the mining process was poisoning everything. Acid mine drainage contaminated the Eagle River with heavy metals. The groundwater beneath Gilman became so toxic that the EPA declared the entire town a Superfund site. In 1984, the company shut down the mines and evicted all 300 residents. Today, Gilman stands as a perfectly preserved 1980s town that nobody can enter. Buildings remain furnished, cars sit in driveways, and it looks like everyone vanished overnight. Armed security patrols the perimeter because the contamination is so severe that trespassing could be deadly. Number 14. Thurmond, West Virginia, from railroad hub to population of 5. Thurmond was the economic heart of West Virginia coal country in the early 1900s, serving as a crucial railroad depot where coal was loaded onto trains. At its peak, Thurmond was one of the wealthiest towns per capita in America, with more money depositing in its banks than in New York City on some days. The decline began when diesel locomotives replaced coal-powered trains. The coal mines eventually closed, the railroad traffic dwindled, and people left. Today, Thurmond has a population of 5. The town exists as a National Park Service historic site where preserved buildings showcase railroad and mining history. Thurmond represents Appalachia's boom and bust cycle. Number 13. St. Elmo, Colorado, abandoned at 10,000 feet elevation. St. Elmo sits high in the Rocky Mountains, founded in 1880 as a gold and silver mining town. At its peak, 2,000 people lived in this remote mountain settlement, serviced by the Denver, South Park, and Pacific Railroad. When the mines played out and the railroad stopped running in 1922, the town died almost overnight. The harsh winters, extreme elevation, and isolation made St. Elmo uninhabitable without economic reason to stay. What makes St. Elmo special is how well preserved it remains. The high altitude and dry climate have prevented rapid decay, and many buildings still stand largely intact. The old general store, town hall, and dozens of homes remain, their interiors still containing goods and furniture. Number 12. Bombay Beach, California, the Salton Sea disaster. Bombay Beach was developed in the 1950s as a resort town on the Salton Sea, California's accidental inland sea created in 1905 when irrigation canals broke. For decades, it was marketed as California's Riviera. Then the sea started dying. With no outlet, agricultural runoff concentrated salt and chemicals to toxic levels. Millions of fish died, creating a stench that made the area unbearable. The water became too salty to support life, and the shoreline receded. Bombay Beach's population collapsed from several hundred to about 200 die-hard residents. The town looks post-apocalyptic, with abandoned homes, rusted vehicles, and dead fish bones covering the beach. Number 11. Kennecott, Alaska, copper boom creates and destroys a town. Kennecott was built to exploit one of the richest copper deposits ever discovered in North America. From 1911 to 1938, the company extracted over 590,000 tons of copper and 9 million ounces of silver. The company built an entire town in the wilderness to support the operation. At its peak, Kennecott had nearly 600 residents. When the highest grade ore was exhausted, the company abandoned everything in 1938. Workers left so quickly, they abandoned personal belongings, tools, and equipment. Today, Kennecott is a National Historic Landmark where visitors can tour the massive ore processing mill. The isolation and cold climate have kept the structures remarkably intact. Number 10. Rhyolite, Nevada, 5 years from boom to bust. Rhyolite's story is almost comically short. Founded in 1904 after gold was discovered, the town exploded to 5,000 residents within 2 years. Rhyolite had electric lights, water mains, telephones, newspapers, a stock exchange, an opera house, and a school for 250 children. The financial panic of 1907 started the decline, and by 1911, the lights went out. By 1916, Rhyolite was completely abandoned. The boom-to-bust cycle took just 12 years. What remains are some of the most photographed ruins in the American West, including the famous bottle house built entirely from beer and liquor bottles. Rhyolite is a perfect example of speculation-driven development that collapses the moment the speculation ends. Number 9. Cairo, Illinois, where two rivers killed a city. Cairo sits at the strategic confluence of the Mississippi and Ohio rivers, a location that seemed destined for greatness. At its peak in 1920, Cairo had 15,000 residents. The town's importance declined when railroads and highways replaced river traffic. But what really killed Cairo was devastating floods and racial tension. The Great Flood of 1937 submerged the entire town for months. Racial violence in the 1960s drove away businesses and residents. Today, Cairo has fewer than 2,000 residents, most living in poverty. Entire neighborhoods are abandoned, and the town has one of the highest vacancy rates in America. Number 8. Terlingua, Texas, mercury mining doom. Terlingua thrived from the 1880s to 1940s as one of the world's largest mercury producers. The Chisos Mining Company extracted mercury for use in gold and silver refining, creating a company town with stores, a church, school, and housing. At its peak, Terlingua had nearly 2,000 residents. Mercury mining is extraordinarily toxic, and workers suffered devastating health effects. When World War II ended, mercury demand plummeted, and the mines closed in 1946. Terlingua was abandoned almost immediately. Today, the ghost town sits in Big Bend country with ruins scattered across the desert. A small artist community has moved into some structures, creating a weird mix of ruins and bohemian revival. Number 7. Dawson, New Mexico, coal disaster town. Dawson was a thriving coal mining town owned entirely by the Phelps Dodge Corporation from 1901 to 1950. At its peak, Dawson had 9,000 residents and was one of New Mexico's largest towns. Two horrific mining disasters sealed the town's fate. In 1913, an explosion killed 263 miners. In 1923, another explosion killed 120 miners. When the coal reserves were depleted in 1950, Phelps Dodge closed everything and demolished the entire town. They literally erased Dawson from the map. Today, the Dawson Cemetery is all that exists, with hundreds of white metal crosses marking the miners who died. The town itself is completely gone. Number 6. Garnet, Montana, gold rush to ghost in 50 years. Garnet boomed in the 1890s when gold was discovered in the mountains east of Missoula. At its peak around 1898, Garnet had 1,000 residents, 4 hotels, 13 saloons, numerous stores, a school, and a doctor. When the easily accessible gold ran out around 1905, people started leaving. By 1912, only 150 people remained. A brief revival during the Great Depression brought miners back, but by 1940, Garnet was permanently abandoned. Today, it's one of Montana's best-preserved ghost towns with over 30 buildings still standing. The BLM maintains Garnet in a state of arrested decay. Number 5. Salton City, California. A real estate scam becomes a ghost town. Salton City was developed in the 1950s as a planned resort community on the Salton Sea, marketed as the next Palm Springs. Developers sold thousands of lots, promising a desert paradise. They built infrastructure for a city of 40,000. The problem was that the Salton Sea was dying. As the sea became toxic and foul-smelling, the dream collapsed. Today, Salton City has about 3,800 residents living among infrastructure built for tens of thousands. Paved streets run through empty desert with no houses, streetlights illuminate nothing, and fire hydrants sit in the middle of nowhere. The town is a surreal landscape of suburban infrastructure without the suburbs. Number 4. Fordlandia, Brazil, Henry Ford's Amazon disaster. While not in the US, this American-built city deserves mention. Henry Ford bought 2.5 million acres of Brazilian rainforest in 1928 to create a rubber plantation. He built an entire American town in the jungle, complete with Midwestern-style houses, a hospital, schools, and a golf course. The project was doomed from the start. The rubber trees fell victim to blight, and workers rebelled against Ford's cultural imperialism. After investing millions and getting almost no rubber, Ford abandoned Fordlandia in 1945. Today, American-style buildings slowly rot in the jungle heat, monuments to corporate hubris. Number 3. Calico, California. Silver mining, ghost town turned tourist trap. Calico was founded in 1881 during a silver strike and quickly grew to 1,200 residents with 500 mines. The town produced over $20 million in silver ore at its peak. When silver prices crashed in the mid-1890s, Calico died rapidly. By 1907, it was completely abandoned. The town sat empty for decades until Walter Knott of Knott's Berry Farm bought it in the 1950s and restored it as a tourist attraction. Today, Calico is a sanitized version of a ghost town with rebuilt structures, gift shops, and staged gunfights. It represents how America commercializes even its ghost towns. Number 2. Times Beach, Missouri. Dioxin contamination forces total evacuation. Times Beach was a working-class town of 2,000 residents near St. Louis. In the 1970s, waste oil contaminated with dioxin was sprayed on the town's dirt roads for dust control. Nobody knew the oil contained some of the most toxic substances known to science. When flooding in 1982 spread the contamination, the EPA discovered dioxin levels thousands of times above safe limits. The federal government bought out the entire town in 1985 and demolished every building. Times Beach was literally erased from existence. Today, the site is a state park where nature has reclaimed what was once a community. Times Beach proves that industrial contamination can destroy towns as effectively as natural disasters. Number 1. Climate change, ghost towns. The future of American abandonment. The most important vanished cities are being created right now by climate change and sea level rise. Île de Jean Charles in Louisiana has lost 98% of its land to coastal erosion, forcing the entire community to relocate. Shishmaref and Kivalina in Alaska are literally falling into the ocean as permafrost melts. These aren't historical curiosities, they're active disasters creating climate refugees within American borders. The federal government is spending billions relocating entire communities, but dozens more are at risk. Cities like Miami, New Orleans, and Charleston face existential threats from sea level rise. We're witnessing the creation of 21st century American ghost cities in real time. These towns matter because they're a preview of what's coming. As climate change accelerates, more American communities will be abandoned to rising seas, intensifying storms, and uninhabitable heat. This is why you should know about vanished American cities, because the next wave of ghost towns is being created right now, and it won't stop unless climate action is taken seriously. Thank you for watching.